So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Give me a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe, comment down below if you got any questions or answers or suggestions. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks. Go make some art. Hello. Welcome to the Art Project. If you're new here, please subscribe. If you enjoy this video, find it helpful in any way, please give me a thumbs up. We're going to do a pop art project inspired by Andy Warhol. This was some Skittles that I did. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to find a label that we like. I scanned and photocopied a bunch of labels from Dum Dum Suckers and Hershey's bars and Jolly Ranchers and Lifesaver gummies, etc. And I blew them up to the size of an 8x10 piece of copy paper. I then took that copy paper and I flipped it over and I scribbled on the back of it. Now I'm going to use this transfer method where you scribble on the back of the paper, and then when you flip it over and draw on the front, it will push the graphite down onto the other paper. So first I just scribble all over it. I'm going to spread it around really good and evenly with a paper towel, and then I'm going to scribble on it some more. That way I get a really good transfer every time I trace it to transfer it. I then took a sheet of 18 by 24 paper and I put a border on it the width of my ruler. This is to keep me from having to do so much square footage. In other words, I've got less paper to draw on, less paper to have to fill in. I cut the excess off of my label and I took a piece of tape and I taped it down to the middle. You can do this in any orientation you want to. The Skittles was different than the way I'm doing this, and you'll see a couple of pieces from other students at the end of the video, and they were also done in a different way. But I taped it down to the middle of the paper for this one, and eventually I'm going to do 9 tracings of this Fanta label. This is the biggest one, the complete one in the middle. The rest of them will be partial labels. So I just took my pen. You can use a pencil or a ballpoint pen or anything, and I'm just going to trace everything. All of the leaves, all of the circles, all of the letters outlines, everything. Now you can leave some things out. For example, if you don't want to do caffeine free, you don't have to trace the caffeine free. But the more you trace on the label, the more it will look like that label. The harder you work on this, the better the result is going to be. Don't be lazy and leave out things that you don't think are necessary unless you don't think you want them in your picture. In other words, if they're good for the label, they're probably good for you. So I did go through and I traced probably 95% of this label. The only thing I remember leaving off was the smallest print in the bottom left-hand corner and the 2-liter, weight and all that in the bottom right-hand corner. All the outlines, the leaves, even the 100% natural flavors I thought were important, and so I traced them. Now, the very first one took me the longest because it is a complete label. You'll notice that every other label tracing goes off the edges of the paper, and so it didn't really take as long. So as you're doing this, it is tedious work to have to trace this over and over and over again. But anything worth doing usually does take a while, and anything that usually takes a while is probably worth doing. I don't know, maybe. Eventually, I turned this whole work over to a student, and I allowed another student to do most of the work. And then I traced the outside of it just to kind of give me a grid to work from. Now you got to look real close in this video because the transfer is real faint. But as long as you can see the transfer, you can see it well enough to paint it in, and it is not necessary to trace it again. Just a second ago, you might want to rewind the video, but just a second ago, I put my ruler on the border and I drew a line where the border was, so I didn't have to trace all the way all of the label. I did the same thing again over here. Sorry about the shadow. We have spotlights in my room as well as normal fluorescent lights, and when the spotlights are on and the fluorescent lights are not on, then I end up with a big shadow on my paper. But we needed to set the mood, so I had to do this with the fluorescent lights off and the spotlights on. I noticed there were some places that I missed, and so we did go back and fix some of those. You want to tape it down, and you can flip the label up, check it to see if you traced everything, and then flip it back down and trace it. Flip it up and check, lay it back down and trace it. So I don't know if I got all of the footage of this, but as you can see, I did this 9 times. Well, me and my student assistant did it 9 times. So this is what the label looks like, and we made a few changes. It doesn't have to be exactly like the label, but for the first one, for the middle one, we tried to match the colors to the best of our ability. Now we're using a combination of colored pencils and paint. If it's real small and thin detailed work, we use a color pencil when we can, and then for bigger areas we try to mix up the colors. In this case, we're using tempera paint, but I honestly believe I prefer acrylic paint. Either one works, whichever one you are happiest with. Most every painting is going to require 2 coats of paint, regardless of whether you use tempera paint or acrylic paint. The second coat always goes on a whole lot faster. So be diligent about the first coat, and then don't be too upset or stressed out about the second coat, because like I said, the second coat goes on faster. If you do use colored pencils, be sure to color in nice and dark so that the color pencil looks like paint and not like color pencil. So this process actually takes a while. I give my students about 2 weeks to complete this project from beginning to end. And so rather than wait until the very end of this painting to show you, I'm going to go ahead and skip to some finished pieces that were done last year or earlier. So just kind of let you see a little bit more of the painting process here. The berries were painted in. Eventually we mixed up another color to do the little stems on the blueberries. And one of the most important things that you can do here is to be sure and use a brush that is the right size. Obviously you want a big fat brush to do really big areas, but you need a really skinny brush in order to get in between some of the very fine details. For example, right here at the bottom, the lettering is white, and she's having to paint in between the letters themselves. You can also tell that they're not perfect. That's okay. Andy Warhol's paintings were very rough, even though they were silkscreen. This one, the Starbrush is backwards. That's okay. And in this one, we chose 6 different color schemes, including complementary and analogous and things like that. This Cracker Jack box was done by using the original colors. The Oreo wrapper using the original colors. Pardon the spill at the top. This Sugar Babies was used both color pencil and paint. And this entire Doritos wrapper, which is 18 by 24, is in color pencil.